Hello, everybody. Welcome to Raising Multilinguals Live. My name is Tetsu Young from Ask Tetsu. Let me present to you my colleague, Uta.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good night, where Tetsu is in the middle of the night. And welcome to our Raising Multilinguals Live. My name is Ute Limacher-Riebert from Ute's International Lounge.
All right. We have three special guests today. Normally we have academics or big institutional members from these big institutions, but today we thought we would have a different approach. Instead of experts on all the raising multilingual type of information, we have somebody who's actually the recipients of all these information, like the actual people who grew up in a multilingual environment, being raised using some or many of the different methods that we talk about, and the different the experts that talk about these. So we have Big Bong with us, and we have Julia and Lawrence. These are brothers, but I'm gonna let them give their little introduction on their languages, their family compositions, and whatnot, what they do in life. Okay, so let's start with Bong. Bong, tell us a little bit about yourself, your upbringing, etc.
Sure. Well, in a nutshell, my name is Bong Su, also known as Big Bong on social media. I have a YouTube channel about languages and cultures. I was born and raised in France, and now I live in Montreal, Canada. I have a French-Lebanese father and a Japanese mother.
Good, fantastic. And Lawrence?
So my name is Lawrence Muela. I live in Switzerland, and my parents are actually, my father is from Barcelona and my mother from Switzerland. And so now I'm studying electronics at the EPFL. And that's it.
Julia?
So my name is Julia. I'm a student as well in communication. And like my brother said, my father is from Spain and my mother is from Switzerland. And now we live in Neuchâtel, Switzerland, with my parents. And yeah.
Good. So I'm the only one all the way out in Japan. I'm the minority here, and I've got like Europe in front of me. Except Bong is actually in Montreal, but he is originally from Europe. So what languages do you guys cover, just amongst you guys? Start with Bong.
Well, fluently, I speak English, French, and Japanese, though my Japanese is very rusty. But I've also learned Korean, German, Spanish, and a little bit of Chinese, and now I'm studying Russian and Lebanese Arabic.
It's a handful.
Yeah.
And every time we do stuff together, and I ask you to talk about your languages, you always say your Japanese is rusty. It's not.
Well, it is. I think your children are better than me, to be honest. They have more opportunities to speak the language than me. So.
Well. Then Lawrence, what languages do you brother and sister cover?
So I speak fluently also French, Catalan, and Spanish. Those are the languages that I speak the best. And after that is German, so Swiss German, and English that I talk, but a bit less good as well.
Oh, okay, so English is actually lower in
a bit lower.
So are these the same for Julia or Julia, or did you learn other things that you didn't want your brother to know?
No, but my Swiss German, my Catalan, and my French might be a little bit better as my brother because he went away for a long time and he didn't have the chance to practice. But I'm planning on learning Japanese, so maybe we can talk together.
Oh, there you go. But I like how you say, because he didn't have as many opportunities as me. You're following up on your brother. That's good. Yeah, we see the brotherly love here. But so you speak the same ones, but to different, degrees.
Yes.
I guess you didn't actually go out and learn a different secret, code that you
No.
didn't want each other to understand. All right. So let's get into some of these very common topics, questions that we get. Things like, what language is used when everybody's together, the parents and the children, or maybe when just the siblings are around. What languages do you guys prefer to use? So I'll start with Mong.
Okay. Yeah. So
You have how many siblings do you have first?
I have 3 brothers and 1 sister, so we're a pretty big family.
Wow, okay.
And my parents still live in France, but it's funny because we talk about families, and you guys being brother and sister, and I have a brother in Lausanne, and I'm gonna be there in Lausanne and Montreux and Genève in a couple of weeks, actually.
Nice.
So it's a small world. Anyway, so my mother has been living in France. So my parents live in Paris right now, and they've been living there for about 35 years. Though my father does not speak Japanese, so the family language is French. It's the language we use when we are all together, and that's the language I also use with my siblings. But the funny thing is that it changed. So back in the days, it used to be Japanese until I was 5, and then we switched to French.
Oh, so
Okay.
you spoke Japanese mainly with mom, obviously, but
That's right.
Amongst your your brothers and sisters, it was actually Japanese until a certain age.
That's right. So before going to school, actually.
Wow.
So my dad
Okay.
was going to work, and then just me, my mother, and my siblings would be all together and speaking Japanese all the time. So after that, we went to school, and but it's a further question, so I'm probably going to reply to that after.
Okay. All right. Hey, let's go with Julia first.
Yeah. So at home, it's a little bit funny because with my mom, we speak Swiss German with my brother. With my father, we speak Catalan. Between my father and my mother, they speak Spanish. And my brother and I speak French together. So it's a little bit a mix of every language at home.
Yeah, and we also switched to French
Yeah.
because before we talked, first we talked in Swiss German, my sister and I. Then we talked in Catalan when we moved to Switzerland. And then we started talking French to each other.
I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Of course,
Yeah.
of course.
Does everybody understand all the languages you guys speak in your family, or are there like in discriminative kind of situations sometimes?
Yeah,
No,
my
yes.
father doesn't understand Swiss German very well,
Okay.
but we often translate.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
Did you say you speak mainly French and sometimes Swiss German amongst the siblings?
No,
Yeah,
together we speak only French,
Okay.
but when at the beginning of our lives, if you want,
Okay.
we spoke in Swiss German, but then we
Yeah.
switched
Oh,
many
okay, okay.
times.
Yeah, and I suppose that you switched from Swiss German to French or Catalan, Lawrence said, and then French because you moved, maybe? Did you move? Or because at the beginning you were together with your mom mainly, and that was Swiss German? I'm just supposing. I'm just asking.
yeah, it's quite possible. So I don't really know, but we switched language when we moved to Switzerland. We started to talk in Catalan when we moved from Barcelona.
Yeah.
And then the friends from school were complaining that they didn't understand anything, so we switched. Yeah.
There you go.
And then you probably speak French together because you went to a French school, or in Neuchâtel, you went to the school in Neuchâtel. So it's the community language that or the school language, the cooler language somehow that you speak among you. I'm just asking. I mean, I have teenagers, as my children are all teenagers, and I went through the same kind of phases. So I always preferred the one that my friends were speaking, not necessarily then the language that my parents had transmitted to me, especially when I was 12-ish onwards. So it started at 12 and then it just stayed like that. I was just curious to know if that was more or less what you experienced as well. And it seems like being the case. I think it's maybe what we all have in common. Great. Yeah, thank you. And maybe I can ask the next question that is now related with this kind of shifts, right, that we experienced also when, what language were you schooled in? So, and what influence did this have on your home languages? We already spoke a little bit about that, but maybe it was slightly different than I assumed. Please, maybe we start with Julia.
Yeah. So at first we went to school in Barcelona, so it was Catalan. But then we went to Neuchâtel, it was French. But when I was like 10 years old, we moved to Mexico. Then we were schooled in Spanish for 1 year. And then we moved back to Switzerland, so it was French again. And yeah, the only influence is that we began to speak in French with my brother. But I don't think there's any other thing.
And how did you experience it, Lawrence?
So yeah, the only influence that I see is the language shift that we experienced. So we changed language between my sister and I, and other than that, I don't really know if there's another influence.
Yes, and maybe one of the influences could be, well, on the home language, but also if you change the school language. This is now another question that I add on top of the one that we have here. Was it easy for you to change from one school language to the other? I mean, I always think about you learn how to read and write in one language or to do maths or science or whatever. I don't know what age you transfer to the other kind of school system. So maybe you can tell us more.
Very little. So we had like I was 7 years old, I think, and my sister like 5 years, so 6 and 4, I don't know. So I don't really remember anything. So yeah, it wasn't hard. So I suppose, but I don't know.
Yes, thank you. And Bong.
Yeah, that's very interesting because it's a bit similar. I didn't travel as much. For me, I joined the French elementary school. But the funny thing is that the teachers and the supervisors did not speak Japanese, so we would be kindly asked to avoid using that language at school.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the teachers actually asked my mom to avoid speaking Japanese to me as much as possible because I would sometimes be confused in class. For instance, if I didn't know a word in French, I would naturally say it in Japanese. I don't know if you guys experience that also, or if you have children who experience that. But of course, I assume that everybody watching us today probably knows this phenomenon called code switching, and it's proven to be completely normal among bilingual and multilingual children. And I don't want to be bashing my French school education. There are many things I'm grateful for. And obviously the teachers at that time, they didn't have the proper training. They just, were facing a very unusual case of pupils speaking a different language. So I understand how confusing it must have been for them. And of course, it wasn't forbidden to speak Japanese with my siblings per se, but it definitely influenced the fact that we stopped using it. Yeah.
Oh, so it was your teachers told your parents not to speak Japanese at home to you guys, and they actually followed that. So your mom stopped speaking
My
Japanese.
mom didn't stop. My mom didn't stop. So she didn't follow the advice. But and there are also other reasons. For example, well, actually, it was maybe the main reason for me. It was more because I was the only Asian-looking kid back at school, and I was a bit bullying because of that. But it's not today's topic. But you know that at that age, you just want to fit in, and of course, there was not much I can do about my physical appearance. But if I could at least blend with other people by avoiding speaking a language they didn't understand, it felt like the solution at the time, so that's what I did. But my mother didn't follow the advice and kept speaking Japanese to us, and I'm grateful for that. But between between us, between my siblings, would speak in French from then on until today.
Yes, yes.
That's
No,
fantastic.
it's not the topic of today. The relationship between language use, and identity. We're going to have a session about that in September, but I would like to know more about this. Maybe afterwards you can share a bit more about that, or when we will have this kind of session, if you can join us then. But it is a very important one. That we cannot just brush off or say, oh, it's not really existing there, because we all use these languages depending on where we are. Also, Julia and Lawrence shared, in order to fit in, somehow you switch to the language of your peers, of the people around you, and where you spend most of your time, which is school. So it had an influence somehow also on your use at home to some extent, but very often during these transitions from one place to the other, so not only staying at home but going to school and being in the community, makes you reflect also on the situation that is at home, that might become completely different from what you have, the world that you are in for the rest of the day, which is, I think, something that we all juggle with. Right, and it can be beneficial. It can be also daunting, and also make you seem lonely or feel lonely and isolated at some point. So, but we are going to come back to that at some other point, moment, right, Tetsu?
Yeah. I mean, all our questions, they sort of have the potential to just branch off into a different topic, but that's fine too. But let's move on to the next question then. As we're still on the topic of schooling. What about reading and writing? So did you actually learn how to read and write in your home languages, especially, if we're talking about something like Japanese, which is a completely different script, this is a relevant topic. And let's start with that then. Bong.
So yes, I did. My mother was actually a school teacher back in Japan, and so naturally she taught us hiragana and katakana, and she made me attend a Japanese homeschool program called Kumon. I hated it at the time. Yeah, it was pretty good though, but I hated it at the time. Yeah, because it was pretty difficult to keep up with the regular French program at the same time, And so I eventually stopped when I entered middle school. But I'm still very grateful today that I still had that chance, because it made me understand the Japanese language in depth. So I did learn Japanese. And how would I do differently? It's easy to say now, but if I had to do it differently, I would have paid more attention at the end probably, and maybe continue Kumon a little longer. And I don't know if they have like ways to conversion of a certificate to make it like I think it's called the GLPT for Japanese.
Yep.
So I would have liked to have some recognition. Yeah, JLPT.
JPLT, I think.
JPLT. Sorry, that was the French. Sorry. JPLT, right.
Yeah.
Can you maybe, as we try to be understandable for the broader audience, can you word out what this means, this abbreviation?
JPLT is Japan Proficiency or Japanese Proficiency Language Test.
Language test.
That's right. That's correct. Yes.
It's usually for foreigners. And it's in cues, like the different stages, and it goes backwards, like the EQ, which is the top level. It's the first, it's literally the first level, but it's the top level. You start at 4, if I'm not mistaken. Yonkyu,
it's 5.
Gokyu, Yonkyu, Sankyu, Nikyu, Ikkyu.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So, and Julia, what about you guys?
Yeah. So I didn't really learn how to write in my home languages. We had in school, we had German classes, but I have to say in the Suisse Romande, the German level is very bad. So we didn't really learn how to write properly. But my mother always wanted us to make the Goethe test. It's but we always refused to my brother. We didn't want to. But yeah, I would do it now. I would like to write in German because here in Switzerland it's very important. And yeah, I'm happy because I will start university in September, and I have bilingual classes, so it's going to be half German, half French. So yeah, I'm happy about that.
That's great.
We have comments from our audience. I mean, first of all, we want to acknowledge everybody who's watching on our two channels, on our Facebook and our YouTube. So welcome from wherever you are. So thank you for taking the time. Once again, we have 3 young adults who have been raised by the way that you guys have been trying to raise your kids, and as far as we can see, it's very successful. And we have Anna, who's given us a nice comment. She says, as a mother of children, well, let me put it up here. As a mother of children who will be at your age in about 10 years, although we didn't say what age you have, I am very interested to hear your experience. So thank you for sharing. I want to echo that. Thank you guys for really sharing, because that's really how we know as parents whether we're doing something that we think are good for our kids, but do you guys appreciate it? That's the kind of thing we want to try to dig out from you guys who've gone through the program.
Yeah.
All
yes,
right.
But let's maybe hear also what Lawrence can tell us about how he experiences reading or learning to read and write, maybe in the home languages.
Read and write. I started learning to read and write French because we went to school here, and in Barcelona the school was very low level, so we didn't. So it was like kindergarten, or I don't know, but we didn't learn to read and write. And for the other languages, Swiss German. So my mother writes to us in German, so we learn to read in German. And at school, they also teach German. But as my sister said, the level is not the best, so it's like B1 or B2 at the end of school. And Catalan, my father writes to us in Catalan also, so to read Catalan is we learned through this. And write, I didn't learn to write, so Catalan I didn't learn it. So yeah.
Yes, and maybe we have also to specify that Swiss German is not a language that you can find in books, right? It's rather
exactly.
a spoken language. And in the Swiss German part, you grew up now in the French speaking part of Switzerland, where French is the community language, but you have also the other national languages spoken and also taught at school, like you said. German maybe not to the extent that you wished or that you would have liked. Let's keep it like that. I know the situation. But it is also discrepancy between writing in Hochdeutsch, in Standard German, and speaking Swiss German. It's like 2 different languages. It's like, I know the difference. So we have to specify this. It's not exactly the same. And you cannot just teach a child to read and write in Swiss German because you do not have the texts. Yeah, they are not there. But it is it's quite a challenge also to learn German for someone who grew up with Swiss German, so the oral Swiss German language only, because the syntax structure is different, the vocabulary is different. So it's like another step to take, just to clarify a bit, like the language situation that you have and where you try to read that. But I would like to point out one thing that all 3 of our guests pointed out today, is that the level of language fluency at the end of your, let's say, academic journey in the school was, you would say you would have liked to have a little bit more, or that you are at a higher level. And I know that many, me included, I mean, I have my teenagers and I was fighting for years to get this level a little bit higher, not only B1, but also B2, especially because if you want to study or work in that country of origin, you need to have nowadays B2 at least. If you want to study, it would be even better to have C1. And none of the schools is actually reaching that kind of level. So how do you do this? How do you fill this gap? I mean, you finish school in July, you start university in September, October. No way that you can go from a B1 or B2 to a C1 in 2 months. So I think that is a big question. I don't want you to answer this question, but I think this is a little bit the next step to take. Or Tetsu, we can also discuss this if you wish.
No. It definitely is a huge topic. Maybe we can take this up, in a separate session. I mean, this in and of itself is, it is a huge topic. So, all right. Well, how about we move on to the next question? So where are we now? I think we've sort of touched upon this a little bit, so we can sort of breeze through this one. But have you experienced language shift? Which is actually one language that was dominant at one point in time, and which became secondary at another time. So with the brothers and sister here, obviously, if you've moved around, this is something that I presume was very strong. If you've been from one country to another, you change your dominant language, right? Lawrence, you want to start kicking this one off?
Yeah. So for example, when we moved to Mexico, I wouldn't say it got dominant, but we were much more exposed to Spanish, and we practice it also a lot more. So it was all the time Spanish, and then we moved back here, and Spanish practically disappeared. So that was a quite big shift, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And also when we moved from Barcelona to Switzerland, and yeah, but other than that, not really.
Similar thoughts, I presume, from Julia?
Yes, but I wanted to say, because when I was little, I used to talk to my mom in Catalan, but she never liked that. She always responded in Swiss German, and I always refused to speak Swiss German because I didn't like it. But one day my brother, my big brother, my idol when I was a little girl. So back then he told me, no, you have to speak Swiss German with your mom. And one day to another, I said, okay, I'm going to speak Swiss German with my mom. It was very hard at the beginning, but then, now I speak fluently Swiss German with my mom. So.
Wow. When you talk about your brother, is that Lawrence, or do you have another one?
Yes, no, Lawrence.
Only two in our family.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
All right, and it's not just moving around, right? So as Julia mentioned, and Long also you experienced this not by moving around, but you went from Japanese to French. So correct. Any comments, thoughts on that?
But that's the thing, I don't remember the shift. So usually it's other people telling me. So friends, my parents' friends, for example, who tell me, oh, when you were a little kid, you were speaking Japanese all the time and we couldn't speak to you in French. So as far as I can remember, it's always been French for me. It's too far back.
I see.
But I don't think we have videos of me speaking Japanese, but that was the case. People were telling me, you were speaking Japanese to me and I didn't understand anything. And yeah. But I'm probably sure I was bilingual, but I didn't like speaking French. But then it shifted. It shifted. I don't prefer speaking French right now. I love both languages, but I'm feeling more comfortable in French than in Japanese, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm sure all the parents watching who are raising kids in different languages would attest to that. My kids, they change in a matter of months. When we're in Japan for a few months, their Japanese just goes through the roof. We go back to Canada, their French goes way higher. So the change can be rather quick when the kids are really young. I mean, it also has to do with their level. They're just not that good in any of the languages, if you want to look at it that way. All right. Uta, did you have something else to add on this?
No.
Okay.
I could, but I won't. I would just wanted to point out that the shift always happens in a way, and I think everyone here on the screen today, we know the other languages are always there, somewhere in the background, maybe for some period of time, and then they come in the foreground again. And this is the nice thing for being multilingual. You can switch, and then it takes a while maybe to feel at home again in that language, and to maybe pick up the slang, the new words that you want to use, and then you're into this. And this is the great advantage of this. So just pointing that out. But maybe we can ask the next question about.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think we're going to get into more, how would I say, raunchy part of the interview. We can get into more emotional stuff. Have you always felt proud of the languages that you speak? Okay. Have you ever, in another way to say this, have you ever been ashamed of speaking a heritage language in public? We've also touched upon this a little bit, but let's address this question directly. And we want to start with Bong.
Yeah. So as I said, I think for me it's a little bit different because it's more than just the language itself. It's also the physical appearance and the genetic background. So, and it's funny because when I look at your children, Tetsu, it's a bit similar when they live in Quebec. I don't know if it's the case in Japan or in Taiwan, but they're different physically. So, but the language is also part of that. And so as I said, I just wanted to. At the time, it was a big identity crisis. During the teenage, I also wanted to change my face completely, become whiter and having green, blue eyes and things like that.
My goodness.
So yeah, so I was ashamed. Yeah, I was ashamed, and well, I didn't shame my mother or my grandparents. I was, I always felt connected, but I felt like I wish it were different and I could grow up as a French person. But then, about the pride. Yes, absolutely. A few years later, when I became a university student back in Paris, it was the complete opposite. So even though I wasn't fluent in Japanese anymore, at the time I was really bad. Today I'm saying I'm rusty, but at the time I was really bad. I still had more job opportunities, and people were also jealous. Like, oh my God, you're so smart, and that's incredible. Seeing you shift from one language to the other, you're like becoming another person. It's like a magic trick, So today I'm very proud of the languages I speak, and I'm trying to work on them as much as I can. And I know that I could always improve and speak them better. So that's what I'm aiming for.
Fantastic. Oh, again, thank you for sharing something that's so deep, and I'm sure the parents watching right now also appreciate the authentic content that you're delivering right now. and
Thank you.
Julia, what do you think about this?
Yeah, so I always felt proud about the languages I speak. I love it, but it's a funny story because we lived in Bern for like 4 years, and we went to the French school there, but it was like multicultural school. There were people from all around the world, and strangely, I was like a little bit bullied because I was Swiss. And then I always was like, no, but I'm also Spanish. I can speak Catalan. Look. And yeah, it was a bit weird because, but no, I never felt ashamed of speaking languages. And but I think it's also a habit because I don't like look at people when I walk in the street and I talk with my father or with my mother. So I think it's so natural that I don't really care. I don't know. So yeah.
Let's see if the experience was the same for Lawrence.
I don't know. So I never really thought about it, but I feel more proud than anything else. So yeah, it's cool to speak more languages. So
yeah, I mean that's also. I mean, a good answer in the sense that I think it's normal, that oftentimes kids don't love or hate languages. It's just like air. It's just something that they do in life. So so yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Yes, but I would like to add something. I mean, it always, like you mentioned, Bong, and also Julia, it always depends also on the context where you grow up in. So the way that other people respond to how you are and what you're speaking. So if a language or an ethnicity at this point, okay, we're drifting again towards the identity and language, but I think it's inevitable today.
Exactly.
You become more aware of that, and I think Bong, you became aware of this very early on in your life. You were a child. I observe this very often. If this is something that happens in primary school, it's something that accompanies you towards until you're adult, and you're much more aware of this. And some others, they are more aware about this when they are teenagers and they end up in a certain, in a group where everyone speaks another language or looks different. I mean, it's the typical teenage years where you become much more aware of who you are, what you are, why you are different, and why you are this multiple faceted person and personality, which is not schizophrenic. Be aware. It's actually, it's just having all these different ways of expressing yourself and this huge array of different options. But I think it's also important for those parents who are following us today and whose children maybe are struggling a bit, or who live in a context where their home languages are not valued, or are not part of the curriculum, or are not not valued and not appreciated and not supported, that this can reflect on the child. But with being quite supportive at home, at least you give them the one world in their daily life where they can feel at home. So where all the languages, all the ways that they feel confirmed as you're fine the way you are. If the others are having troubles, we cannot change the whole world, but we can at least change the world that you grow up in with mommy and daddy and the siblings, etc. Like a bit like Tetsu does also at home, right? You're creating a multilingual home, and it does matter how the rest of the world is, of course, because we don't live in a bubble, but it surely gives your children a lot more of self-confidence in growing up with these languages, that if it's not given by the parents, I think it can affect quite seriously also the children later on. But I'm just generalizing maybe, but it's also my personal experience, so I'll keep it like that.
All right. Okay. Let's move to the next question. I'm actually going to skip a little bit. I'm going to fuse the next question into this one that we say on the screen. So I mean, I think we get from the discussion so far that you guys are thankful to your parents. You appreciate that they raised you in multiple languages, and that you sometimes you've only realized the value later in life. Now, is there a difference then in how your parents raised the siblings in the family? Like Mong has, you're 5 kids in the home, and we have Julia and Lawrence right here. My impression so far is Julia and Lawrence probably went through a similar process. It feels like you felt similar things, but is there anything you want to comment on this? Is there a difference in how you think that how your parents raised you guys? Julia?
I don't think so. I think, it was pretty much the same.
Okay.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
You agree? And what were some things that worked? And is there anything that you think your parents did that didn't work, that you guys don't think was beneficial?
I don't see anything, but what I think worked.
You have perfect parents.
But what I think that really worked is that my mom and my dad, they always kept speaking to us in those languages, because my mom told me the other day that when we were little kids or babies, we were in Spain, and she always tried to talk to us in Swiss German, even though we were babies. And the people there always asked, but why are you doing that? That's strange, that's weird. You could just talk in Spanish, we don't care. And she said, no, it's very important.
Wow.
And yeah, she always kept like just
wow. You do have perfect parents.
but also, as I said earlier, even though I spoke to her in Catalan, she always responded in Swiss German. She never responded in Catalan. And I think it's very strong mentality.
I'm sure people watching are nodding virtually. It's just something that comes up so frequently. We get, Rita and I and Rita would get questions like this all the time. If you're in the park, playing with your kids, should I still enforce my heritage language and whatnot? Other people are around. We feel ashamed, or you have strong parents who've really pushed through. So good on them. Bon, five kids in the house.
Yeah.
There must be some differences between how
absolutely, yes. Absolutely. But there is also, I think it's really important to emphasize on the fact that, yes, my mom was also very stubborn and strong. And maybe it takes that in order to
it does.
Educate your children in a certain language. But as you said, 5 kids, and I'm the eldest. So obviously there's a difference. My youngest brother is 10 years younger than me. So my parents were a bit younger and they had more time and energy compared to the other ones. But the 3 first were pretty close in age, and we attended Kumon, the 3 of us. So we were educated a little bit in Japanese, but my 2 youngest brothers didn't go to Kumon. And that being said, my mother spoke in Japanese to all of us all the time. She speaks in Japanese all the time till today. So as we mentioned, even though so there was a culture in our house where my mom would speak to us in Japanese and we would reply back in French. But even though some of us don't speak Japanese anymore, it's still there somewhere in our brain. So everybody understands everything. For the part of what worked and what didn't, I couldn't really answer that because it wasn't an active education which was well planned. However, I have a few half French, half Japanese friends, and some of their Japanese parents chose not to speak Japanese, and I can see the difference. And I don't know, if they followed the school's advice, or if they, wanted to blend in, if they wanted to, or also use their children to improve their French. And I'm not here to judge anybody. Everybody's different, and it's difficult to be a parent. But of course, today my friends regret not speaking Japanese, or at least being able to understand at least to make it easier for them to learn. So, yeah, I think if there is one thing I would probably do, and I would ask parents who want to raise their children in a bilingual, multilingual environment, just keep speaking the language. It's the basic. If you want to teach more, the writing systems and everything, go for it. But if you don't have the time or the energy, what you can do is just to speak the language. Because for my mother, well, she was a teacher, so I think it was natural for her. But I think it was also to make it easier for her. She was living in France, surrounded by French-speaking people, and she wanted to, be able to speak to her children as naturally as possible. So now she can do that, and I don't know about other Japanese mothers who can't, communicate with their children freely, and I think it's a bit sad. So just speak to them; they'll understand. And even though they reply back in another language, it doesn't mean that they don't understand anymore.
Yeah, well, we did have a session on this a while ago. It's a phenomenon called receptive bilinguals. So it's still, I tell parents all the time, even if they don't, speak back in your target language, or as long as you know that they understand, that's a huge win already. And one day, if they really actually wanted to study actively and they suddenly found some super motivation to do it, they're going to be miles ahead than if they were to start from scratch. So your younger siblings are still miles ahead of anybody if they ever wanted to really deepen their Japanese their language.
But actually, my little brother who lives in Lausanne is going to Japan to live there. He's going to buy a house in Japan in Zushi, so he's going to have to learn at some point.
There you go. But again, he's gonna realize, it's just gonna come out because it's in there, right? It's gonna retrieve it. So, well, good. Wow, that's getting serious. Buying a house in Japan.
But his wife is also Japanese, so it helps.
That's nice.
And that's now an interesting question that I have. But do they speak Japanese to each other then? Your brother and his wife?
No, she is full Japanese, but she was raised in the States. She was born in Japan, but she moved to the States when she was 7. So I think she's definitely more. She speaks better English than Japanese today. But she's working for a Japanese company, and I think they're getting closer there. And my brother also wants to speak Japanese, but he's really shy about it. I don't want to talk about my brother that much because if he watches this video, he's going to say, "Hey, what'd you tell everybody that?" But yeah, he's a bit shy when it comes to speaking Japanese. And she's a bit, yeah.
Yes.
It's the same for her. She lives in Switzerland, so I'm sorry. Go on.
Yeah. No, I would like to go ahead because you were talking about your brother and your his wife, etc. I mean, you're all pretty young, but we have also a comment here from La Famiglia Fettuccini. She's also an Instagrammer. Happy to hear from all of you. Which language do you think you will speak with your children? A family language or your dominant language? If you will have children. Well, we never know. But I think this is one of the questions that then at some point you will ask yourself. I mean, I didn't when I didn't have children. I just said, oh, well, I will just talk whatever language I want. But at that point then, having multiple languages and maybe being or living in another country where you are used maybe to speak another language on a daily basis, it might have happened this shift, a major shift also in your life and in your use of the languages. So this question is quite, it's not so easy to answer, I think. If I would add to this question from our follower, if you would have to start a family now, so at this point, because I don't think that you can say what will happen in 5 years or so in the future. What would you say, Julia? You were nodding.
So I have already thought about this question before. And I thought if I live in Switzerland, I think Swiss German, because I think we will stay in the French part. I think if it's now, yes. So Swiss German, I think is the best because it's also a language from Switzerland. It's very important. But yeah, I always question myself about, is it possible to speak many languages with your child, like switch? I don't know, but it seems complicated.
It is possible, but it is possible, but it needs to be quite well organized. But let's talk about that later if you wish. But Bong, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, first of all, it would depend on the on the other party, like the other person, the other parent. But so she would be speaking a certain language. I would want to speak a different language and live in a language that speaks a different one. So that at least trilingual. Sorry. But yes, definitely. I think it's good for the children. Not even just for the fact of speaking different languages, but I think it conditions your brain to problem solving and these kind of things. And actually, Tetsu, we're good friends, but I'm really watching all his videos and gives me a lot of inspiration for my future potential family. But then he spoke about in the video we made together, actually, Opal. So I think it's good to stick to one language. Unfortunately, I don't think I would be able to do that in Japanese, but probably French or English, we'll see. Again, it will depend on the place and the person.
Okay.
So
So it wouldn't be Japanese. I think that is one of the things that you wanted to know as well.
Okay. Yeah. Continuing with Tetsu's strategy, he lives with his parents when he's in Quebec. So if my children could be in contact with my mother enough to learn Japanese from her, knowing that she's a teacher and she'll be able to teach them, Japanese writing system, that could be an option too.
there you go.
So, okay.
Yeah.
All your things, and get all your resources. Why not? Right? Win-win. They want to see their grandkids.
Yeah, of course. But then I'll have to convince her to move to Canada. That's a different story.
Yes,
Lawrence,
and Lawrence.
Lawrence, yeah, I'm expecting a different answer from you.
No, so it's a mix of what my sister said and what Bong said. It would depend on the place where we live and the language that the mother of the kids would speak. So I would choose a third one, so they have at least 3 languages.
Mm-hmm.
And
At least 3. You don't
that
think
would
about
be that would be the idea. So
Mm-hmm.
so the mother would also need to talk another language that the language of the place we live.
But it's a bit, I don't want to talk too much about my personal life, but then if that becomes a criterion, for example, like you're meeting a person and like, do you speak different languages? And the person says no. What are you gonna do? So
I will teach her.
Yeah.
I will teach her the language. No, I don't know,
but we have to
Bong,
stay
you would go
open-minded.
with the language you can. Yeah, but you would go with the language that she speaks, and then you add the other ones. I mean, and actually, who in this world is actually really monolingual? You understand to some extent. I mean, if you listen to Spanish music or something, to some extent you understand some words at least. So it's really very unrealistic to think you will find someone who is really monolingual.
It's true.
Yeah, in the very traditional way of speaking, but I understand that you would rather determine the choice, making it depend on the constellation, let's say, where you live and who the partner is and what other languages are covered by the partner. So you're completely free to juggle between any language that you have. So you would know, and this is now a tricky question, sorry, Tetsu, but it's also something that I ask parents if they come to me and say, oh, well, I'm multilingual, which language should I choose? And I say, okay, what language do you know nursery rhymes in, or that you can react very quickly without looking up in the dictionary, or where you can say watch out very spontaneously, because if you have to think about that, it's very difficult that you can be spontaneous with your child. But there are several criteria, of course. But I think the first answer from you all is the languages that you will then choose on a more rational level. And except Julia, who said it would be then Swiss German if you live in Switzerland. Maybe if you live in Australia, maybe you will still choose Swiss German. That's my question.
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
because I have to say I really love Switzerland, because I don't know, I feel really good here, and I think at one point in my life I will come back, so it's very important that the kids speak German. So I think
the reason I'm asking is my husband is also Swiss German, and we speak German together, and I speak Italian as well, and French, etc. And so at that point we had this discussion about German or Swiss German. If you live abroad and there is no community, you're the only person who speaks Swiss German with your child, and then it can become quite, and you're maybe not home that often, he was traveling and etc. So how much input can I realistically speaking give to my child? So these are things to think about, but it's way too early. But thank you for answering this question. Thank you very much.
Why do you assume it's way too early? We don't know.
I just wanted to give them more time. I mean, du führst mich aufs Glatteis. Okay.
come back
That's it.
to you guys, okay, rather than your kids. Let's come back to you guys for our final question of the session. Okay, so you have stronger and weaker languages. Would you consider working, let's say, in a country with one of your weaker languages? Is that something you would consider? Lawrence, let's start with that. Let's start with you.
Yeah, I would definitely consider it. So but it depends on the job actually. So, but if I really want to do the job, so I would definitely move to this other country.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but I would learn more. I think so because I have, if it's a weaker language, I would definitely learn. So perfection it. I think.
It's good.
Yeah, and maybe can I add a little bit more to this? So we're talking about the weaker language. Would you even consider moving to a country where you don't know the language yet?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think this is one of the advantages of us. I mean, we know a lot of languages and we are quite flexible. We would probably learn the additional language that's required for a job or for study or whatever, maybe a bit quicker than others. Or we have another approach to this. So would you even consider moving to a country or working in a country, studying in a country, living in a country where the language is not among the ones that you know already? So it's too...
If I want, I would. So if I would want to do it, I would do it, in my opinion, but I don't know.
Julia, do you know?
Yeah, I think I could, because I would find it quite challenging, and I love doing challenges. But yeah, I'm not so sure. Maybe if there's a big opportunity or really good reason, yes, but it wouldn't come to mind to go now to, I don't know, for example, Japan, and say, okay, let's work there and learn Japanese. Like, no, it would be very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Last word for
You're
Bong.
right.
Yeah. So it's a good question, and I think we have to ask ourselves first, what's the motivation? Would you move to the country in question because you want to improve your skills in the language, or for other reasons? For me, because I have a lot of polyglot friends, and they do move from country to country to improve their language skills. For me, it would be for external reasons. So, for example, a potential wife, a job, or something. Roots also to get back to Japan for at least a year. That's a project of mine, to see all the seasons. But no, yeah, of course, as Julia said, I love also getting out of my comfort zone and challenge myself, challenge my brain, because you feel awake when it happens. Everything is new and you learn so many things every day, and you feel like, wow, my brain is incredible. My body is incredible. Like the body sometimes, the way you speak with your hands, the body language. And I think that's fascinating, and it's the beauty of language learning. So yes, the answer is yes, but it would depend on other things. Maybe if I win the lottery and I have 100 millions, I would probably do that, just travel for fun and learn as many languages as possible. But realistically speaking, I would consider going to a country of my weaker or a language that I don't speak, but it would be for a certain external reason.
That's good. I mean, if we really summarize your thoughts, is that because you already speak a few languages, you just sort of have this confidence that you can do it. I mean, you say you like challenges and whatnot, but how many times have we heard people who say, I can't speak that language? I mean, why would I go? I mean, I'm not good with languages, and things like that. No. Opportunities lost.
Yes, or also people who move to a country because of the job of their partner, and then they say I can't find a job because I don't speak the language, or it would take me too long. Of course, we have to differentiate here, like you said before, that it depends also on what language we're talking about. If we are moving for 3 years to do a job or to accompany our partner, and the language is a completely new one, like for me it would be Japanese or Chinese, it's very, very different, and it would take a long time. Of course, I cannot think that it's realistic within a year to learn it to an extent to be able to function in a workplace. So realistic kind of decisions to make. So this, I think we have to distinguish between moving there for a language or for our job or for the job of our partner, and for how long and how distant or how similar the language of the new place is in comparison with the languages that we already know, and how much can I actually,
That's absolutely true. And if I can add something, it's it's very personal, but sometimes you feel more connected to some cultures rather than others. For example, for me, Spanish, I love the la cultura latina, dancing, salsa, and the party kind of culture. So I would definitely go to Colombia, to Mexico, just because I love the culture. But if you're following your husband or your wife because they have a job opportunity, but you don't like the culture, or you don't feel attracted by it, it can also be difficult to be motivated. So as language learners, also I think it's easier for us to be inspired and to feel connected to any language, to be honest. But let's say you go to China and you have no interest whatsoever to wonderful Chinese history, the millennial, history, and the countryside, and the food, of course, the food. Yeah. Well, it's too bad, but then it's something that can be forced. So I think it's also something to take into consideration.
Indeed. And we're out of time. We can go on for hours, right? It's a good thing. Good thing is normally at this point we would take a few minutes to talk about our next session, usually in 2 or 3 weeks down the road. But today we don't have that because Raising Multilinguals Live will be on a little short summer break for August. So this is a great way to conclude 13 months since we started this adventure, Rita, Uta, and myself, and it's a fun and very relaxed session, very informative to get your perspective, I'm sure, for all our viewers. So thank you for taking the time with us today, sharing your thoughts, your expertise to a certain from a certain perspective, I think, and I'm sure all our audience appreciate that. And I want to thank our audience for following us throughout all these months, and thank you for being there today on YouTube and on Facebook. So, do we have any final thoughts? Anybody on today's session, Uta and our guests? Are we good?
No? Well, maybe I can add something. It's always nice to see for parents who maybe have very young children to see what their children might think about what they are doing in 10, 15 years from now, wherever they are standing. So thank you very much, Julia, Bong, and Lawrence, for joining us today and for sharing your own experience. That is the one of many other multilinguals, polyglots, etc. And let's just celebrate all the languages and enjoy them and have a very nice summer. And we'll be back in September. I think the 7th of September should be the next one. So please stay tuned with us on Facebook and YouTube to know more about the future sessions. Thank you very much.
And don't forget to give us some feedback if you have the time. The link is in the description. All righty. Thank you to the guests. Thank you to the audience. We'll be in touch and see you in September. Have a good summer break, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Tschüss, auf Wiedersehen. Arrivederci.